This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our 2016-17 preview of the Southeast Division, the last one before we kick off this NBA season. And man, this is one heck of a division for us to discuss. And I'm really excited because we got a great guest on board to talk about this division. But before we even get into that, you know I got to roll out the red carpet to my brother from another mother, my man who writes one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hey, Mr. Shaw, what's going on, man? How hot is it down there?
It's hot, man. And, it's the middle of October for us in South Florida, and it stays hot in down here at the MIA. But salute to all defense listeners, NBA Baseline. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's the last one, dog. It's the last one of our division previews, and as you mentioned and alluded to, a great guest coming on. Can't wait to jump right in, man.
Most definitely, man. Look, this guy, he's been doing his thing for quite some time. He's an excellent writer for Fox Sports. He is now hosting Locked On Clippers podcast that you can find Monday through Friday. Definitely doing this thing, and he's ready to talk Southeast Division basketball. Our man, DJ Foster, he'll be on in a few moments to help kick this off and really kind of set the table as we finalize out our previews for this season. Once again, we'd like to thank each and every single person who's been tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. You know how to get my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me, at GameFace Lee. We always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle, at NBA Baseline. We're available on all the major platforms, available on Stitcher, iTunes, Player FM, Microsoft TuneIn, available on Google Music, the Roku channel. So be sure to download any one of those platforms to allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things NBA. Big shout outs to our peoples, the Sports Brothers Network, who does lovely covering South Florida sports. But more importantly, we also talk NBA basketball. They simulcast us. So we encourage you to go to the sportsbrothersnetwork.com. Check those guys out. They do it lovely. And also a big shout out to NBA Lead. Shaw and myself have been on board with these guys. They are going to be the premier social media entity discussing the NBA, and we are a part of it. So be sure to go to NBALead.com. Just recently, my man Shaw has put out some awesome previews for teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Utah Jazz. I myself have dropped a few discussing the Cleveland Cavaliers. So be sure to go to NBALead.com and check us out throughout the season as we continue to build the brand that is the Baseline NBA podcast. Before we get into our preview, once again, we want to make sure as this season draws near that we want you ready for the season. Dip down in the proper sports gear. And to do that, you need to link up with our people's fanessentials.net. Why do you say? Because Fan Essentials covers and has all of the premier gear that you need for your favorite sports team. Prices start at $14.99 and $34.99. But if you go on board today, you find the sports gear that you want. You get to the checkout aisle, you use Baseline as the checkout item as the promo code, you get 30% off your first month. So be sure to go to fanessentials.net to get the essentials you need for this upcoming NBA season.
Oh, was that him?
I don't know. How many fingers did he have?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the binoculars out in time.
Look, well, let's not stand on ceremony, mate. Let's start the show.
Yes, sir. It's about that time to talk Southeast Division basketball. And on board with us this week, man, this guy is, blazing the podcast as we speak. He's always got his finger on the pulse regarding the NBA, down with Fox Sports. Our man out in the West Coast, DJ Foster. DJ, thanks for hopping on board with us to talk about the Southeast Division, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, guys. It's going to be fun.
Yep. So let's get right into it, DJ. When you think about the Southeast Division, I think this is how we usually intro most of our guests who've come on board of our podcast so far for these previews. I ask people straight up, when you think of the Southeast Division, what's the first thing that comes to mind? With all of the moves, off-season, the trades, free agency pickups, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about the Southeast Division?
I think the middle. That's what I think. I think this is like the entire middle of the Eastern Conference, and it seems like it's this way every single year. There's never really, I mean, aside from when the Heat were winning championships, it always feels like this. These teams are just always like smack dab in the middle of the Eastern Conference, kind of battling it out with each other. And when you look at it this year, man, there could be legitimately 500 teams in this division, just all kind of scrapping for the last few seeds in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I find it so interesting because they just seem like they're so evenly keeled. As you go through these lineups and then you finalize based off of what they did last year and what they're doing this year, it's just hard to imagine, who you can definitively speak and say this team actually is going to be the best team coming out of this division. And I think, to me, that's what's going to make this, exciting. There was a time where it just really was just dominated by the Miami Heat. And, last year we've just seen the Orlando Magic, and we're talking about the Washington Wizards, who just can't seem to really solidify themselves as being a legitimate team. So I think it's going to be great as we kind of rifle through these 5 teams, where we might find that niche, that little thing that says, okay, this is where, and I'm really going to be excited to ask you, obviously, at the end, how you have this division stacked bottom to the top, because I really think it's going to be a matter of wins in our, single-handed. That's probably going to divide, who's going to be on top and really who's going to be in last place of the division. So let's go right into it. The first team, obviously, and we're talking about from teams last year, bottom up, finished in last place, the Orlando Magic, a team that finished 35-47. The Scott Skiles project, again, you know what I'm saying? I mean, talk about bad sequels. I don't know what Hannigan was thinking when he decided to hire Scott Skiles. Clearly, maybe they thought with the best intentions that by bringing him back into the fold that he can turn around, make it right with this young group of guys. But even with what he did, even he wasn't satisfied and decided to take off. So the Magic go ahead, they hire Vogel. And to me, the biggest surprise, I think, more than anything other than hiring a new head coach, is the fact that they got rid of their, first round pick, who, most guys usually keep 5 or 6 years. Victor Oladipo gets shipped over. They bring in Serge Ibaka. And now we're talking about, well, what do we make of this Orlando Magic team? And so, DJ, you look at this team didn't represent 35 wins last season. I think that this team was much more competitive than people gave them credit for. But you now say we're moving on with Victor Oladipo. So what is that now saying about this Magic team moving forward?
I was shocked. I was shocked when they made the Oladipo trade because it seemed like he was kind of on the cusp of a breakout for a little while. And he was finishing seasons strong both the last 2 years. And it was just kind of an interesting thing for me that they moved on so quickly. A young guy with so much potential for what can only be viewed as a declining player in Serge Ibaka. I think we've seen the best of Serge. So it was a strange move on that front. But I think on the whole, the Magic are one of my sleeper teams this year. I love the Bismack Biyombo signing. They have lots of rim protection all of a sudden. They're big. They're long. Aaron Gordon, for me, is probably going to be my top breakout player of the year. I think he's incredibly talented offensively. We know what he can do. He's a crazy athlete, but he's added a lot of skill to his game, even over just the last few months of the regular season last year. This was the 16th ranked team in defensive efficiency last season, and now you're bringing in Frank Vogel, who in my mind is a huge coaching upgrade. I actually really like Orlando's stock this year. I think if anyone's going to be a surprise in that Southeast division, it's Orlando.
Well, and I love the fact that you brought up Vogel there, because that's definitely going to lead me into my next question in terms of Vogel's had a history, of being able to really coach bigs up, if you will. But what are you making about the situation now with Vucevic, Biyombo, and Ibaka? Vucevic having to really kind of earn his starting spot under Vogel. Do you see that becoming an issue? I mean, I know you said you just like the rim protection that they have there, but do you think, is there any way that Vucevic kind of becomes like the odd man out and the guy that they may try to look to move at some point during the season?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think he would be the guy to dangle in a trade, but it's tough, as we've seen, in Milwaukee with Greg Monroe. Similar players, post players, big centers who aren't crazy mobile, but great down low on the block. The nice thing about Vooch is that he can spread the floor a little bit. Here's the thing, though, with Orlando. Having too many quality bigs is a good problem to have. You can rotate these three pretty easily, and that kind of covers your front man rotation, right? Your front court rotation. So I don't think they necessarily have to trade Vooch, and I don't think it's going to become a huge issue. But if the right trade pops up for some backcourt help, if you can move Vooch for, a great shooting guard or maybe even a great point guard, depending on how you feel about Elfrid Payton, I think the Magic should probably jump at that.
DJ Foster joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast, our 2016-17 preview of the Southeast Division as we're talking Orlando Magic basketball. The Orlando Magic, to me, DJ, a really interesting team. And going back to the point of us talking about Victor Oladipo, a lot was made about whether or not the dynamic of Oladipo and Elfrid Payton would work out. And I just find it very interesting that Oladipo was the odd man out, and that there must still be a high ceiling for Elfrid Payton. Can you kind of elaborate on what you saw from Payton last season? I felt that in some ways he may have taken a step back, and I think he was trying to find himself, didn't do as much as I think he's capable of doing. Can he find that under Vogel as the head coach?
Yeah, I think a lot of it with the choosing Payton over Oladipo, which is essentially what they did, had to do with the money, right? Payton's controllable for the next few years on a rookie scale contract. Oladipo is scheduled to get paid this summer, so I think that part of that decision was definitely financial. But when you look at it too, Payton has all the makings of a great distributing point guard. He's 7.9 assists per 36 minutes last year. He's got a really nice assist to turnover ratio. He's obviously not a great shooter and not a natural scorer, but this guy really knows how to get his team involved at a really young age. Remember, he's still just 22 years old. He's got a whole bright future ahead of him. So I don't think Orlando made a bad decision by sticking with Payton, and I think Vogel is going to help him out some going forward next year.
Well, you talk about not making a bad decision. Well, what about this decision and the decision to bring in Jeff Green, at the money they did? I think it's a 1-year deal, whatever the case may be. But, is he somebody who can thrive under the Vogel system, if you will, and be a quality sixth man and really help this team, giving them some bench power?
This is one of the moves I didn't understand for Orlando.
There we go.
I like the offseason. I've seen Jeff Green too much, and Jeff Green is always a player that you can talk yourself into. He is the epitome of...
That's why they call him Uncle Jeff, DJ. I mean, that's exactly the reason why they call him Uncle Jeff. He'll talk you into whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? I remember back in the day when I used to drop 15 on him. That's how Uncle Jeff do, man. I'm just saying.
No, it's totally true. You can really he's athletic and he's big and he has size. Has that ever translated to anything? No. For Jeff Green? Have we ever been wowed by any Jeff Green performance?
I will say this much, though, and I don't want us to veer off too much from the point and I completely agree with you guys, because I was really scratching my head about this for not just the Magic, but just Jeff Green himself. Like sometimes there's some moves that are clearly dictated by the contract. There's some moves just dictated, by your play. I kind of had this notion in my head that I think maybe Jeff Green would have been better suited if everything had played itself out properly. He would have probably been a better player under Scott Brooks. I felt like Scott Brooks knew what to do with Jeff Green more than what Jeff Green knew to do with himself. And this is just another player now that's just journeying through team after team after team and really has not figured it out for himself. And he needs the right coach to help him figure it out.
Right. And from Orlando's point of view, I just don't understand why you would give a 30-year-old athlete who's on the downside of his career a $15 million contract. There's some holes on this team. You need some shooting guard depth behind Fournier and Hazonia. You needed some defensive wings to, really elevate this team. Jeff Green is neither of those things. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
DJ Foster joining us here at the Baseline NBA podcast as we're talking Magic basketball. DJ, just to your point then, and I think it's safe to say that this will not be one of those X factors. Jeff Green is not going to be your X factor as to why we think this Magic team is going to be a sleeper team then, right?
Yeah, correct. That's safe to assume.
All right. So as we kind of move things forward, though, who do you find to be the X factor? Who do you think is really going to step up and really thrive from this, now in the Vogel era at moving forward? Is it guys like Mario Hezonja? Is it Aaron Gordon? I mean, we saw Aaron Gordon last year, second half of the season, when he finally started getting those minutes. This guy can be a beast. And a lot of people are talking about, he can really be someone that can help put the Magic over the top. Obviously, he gets the minutes consistently. Can you see that from Gordon under this first year with Vogel as well?
Yep, I think Vogel isn't going to play any games with him. I think he realizes that for the Magic to reach their potential, they need Aaron Gordon. I had a little Clippers flashback there of the Eric Gordon days, apparently. They need Aaron Gordon to play about 36 minutes a night, right? They need his athleticism. Great energy on the defensive end. A crazy athlete who can kind of balance that 3-4 spot if you want to go ultra big. I love it. I love it that with everyone going small, the Magic are finding ways to kind of get bigger, but still stay mobile. Serge can move, and you play Gordon at the 3. That's a lot of size and rebounding ability, but he can cover threes. So I just love Gordon's potential. I think he's the guy who's really going to blow up this year. 21 years old, man. 21 years old.
Well, and I think that's obviously a valid point too, but kind of just skated by my guy who I like to talk about, and that is Mario Hezonja. I just love this guy's attitude. I love his mentality, how he attacks the game. But Evan Fournier is a guy who really has been overlooked, I think, over the last couple of years, and has been quietly very productive for this Orlando Magic team. Between those two guys, and I guess Fournier is going to be the starting guard at the beginning of the season, but which one of those two guys is really, really essential to this team's success?
Oh, Fournier, absolutely. If something happens to him, the Magic all of a sudden transform from this sleeper team with a great front court to a team with zero spacing and too many bigs. Right? If something happens to him, it all kind of crumbles. He's crucial because he's the perimeter shooting. He's the floor spacing. You're not getting that from Peyton. If you're playing Vooch, that limits your spacing. So there are some issues there if Fournier's not healthy. But man, 40% 3-point shooting last year. It makes sense why the Magic paid him big money.
Yeah, underrated for sure.
The Orlando Magic with a 23-18 record at home, but on the road 12-29. Certainly a team that can score points, averaging over 102 points per game, but also susceptible to giving up those points as well, too, roughly around 103. So it'll be an interesting season. Clearly, the calling card for Vogel, especially with the young team, is that he can get this team to improve defensively. Will they be able to score the ball consistently now that one of their key scoring pieces, Oladipo, has moved on? It's going to be a big question, but certainly shoes that can be filled, to your point, Shaw and DJ, with regards to guys like Hezonja, like Fournier, and maybe a step up in the right direction for Elfrid Payton at the point guard position. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 2016-17 preview of the Southeast Division with our special guest, DJ Foster from Fox Sports. He hosts and is also a part of the podcast that is blazing the social media wires right now, Locked On Clippers. Be sure to check out, Locked On Clippers. Be sure to check out that show, available Monday through Friday on the major platforms, iTunes and Stitcher Radio. So let's go ahead and move to the team that finished fourth best in the division. And it's a team that I really consider as a sleeper team. To your point, DJ, you have the Magic as a sleeper team. I consider the Washington Wizards a sleeper team. And maybe they did sleep last season because they finished at 41-41 at a 500 record. And it's just really hard to imagine a team of the caliber of having a combination of John Wall and Bradley Beal only finishing 500, but clearly another team forced to move in a different direction. Randy Whitman gone as the head coach for the Washington Wizards. They bring in Scott Brooks, obviously an offensive-minded coach, but a coach who knows how to coach up a young team. Gone is Nene. They obviously are settling on their front court play to be the combination of Gortat, Morris, and Porter. So when you look at this team, DJ, it seems like they're trying to trim the old age, not so much trim the fat, but they're trying to trim the old age. What is it that you're looking for from this basketball team that really should be a team that's in the upper 40s as far as win totals going, maybe even to the 50s when you have a combination of Wall and Beal?
Yeah, they just have to stay healthy. The Wall and Beal backcourt has to stay healthy. They never do. I'm tired of waiting on Bradley Beal to play 80 games or even 70 games. He just misses so much time, and it's so frustrating because without him, this team is just, they lack the firepower. They don't have the weapons that John Wall could really use on the wing without Bradley Beal. So I'm actually pretty down on Washington. I think they're actually going to take a step back from where they were last year. And part of that is not trusting Bradley Beal to stay healthy, but I also don't love their bench. And Markieff Morris, to me, is kind of one of those guys who poisons the well. I'm just kind of out on Washington in general.
Wow, that's tough talk there, man. I mean, the Wizards are a team that, like you said, from a talent standpoint, if they can stay healthy, should be up there, and they seem to be very far removed from surprising teams a couple seasons ago. But I want to get your thoughts when you talk about that bench. Trey Burke, Kelly Oubre, can he make a step now in his second season? Which one of those two guys you think is most important and can actually be productive off that Wizards bench?
I like the Trey Burke acquisition from an asset standpoint because you're getting a young player who still has time to improve for basically nothing. I did like that from an asset standpoint. We still don't know if he can actually play, though. There's really been nothing in his career thus far to suggest that he's going to be even a quality backup point guard. And Oubre, we just haven't seen enough of him either. He's still very young. He has some raw scoring ability, but we just haven't seen it. And the additions of guys like Andrew Nicholson and Jason Smith, they're not going to add anything defensively. It's just, I think they took a step back, guys.
DJ, I'm walking on a wire here. So, pardon me if I sound like I might have just had a heart attack, or if you may have ripped my heart out by telling me that you're not feeling the Washington Wizards here. Maybe I'm more so feeling it on the idea that you have a solidified point guard in John Wall, finished 19-10 last year. And I really think that, yes, if probably a more consistent up-tempo type of basketball being played for this team, even though, and this, look, they were fifth in pace last year, but I just felt like this team just didn't score the basketball consistently. I feel like maybe there is much more we can now see from guys like Porter, guys like maybe even Markieff Morris, because I feel like Whitman struggled to figure out a way to make Nene happy when he did finally get healthy, and then to be able to find the spacing with Gortat. I just feel like there's probably more spacing with that front court with Porter, Morris, and Gortat with Scott Brooks as a head coach in that system that John Wall can actually facilitate as he's even scoring. But I completely agree with you with the fact that if Bradley Beal is not healthy, then this really is a moot point. But to me, what I just find more interesting is now that there's talks about Josh Smith possibly jumping on this team. So maybe not so much poison, but certainly now a little bit more toxic potential could be had from this. What do you make of, could Josh Smith help bolster this bench that we're even questioning right now with the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, Josh Smith and Markieff Morris as your power forward rotation.
Ew.
Have fun with that, Scott Brooks. Welcome to Washington.
That's not a good combination, though. And I kind of agree with you with the overall. They added all these guys, and I think a couple of rookies that I can't even pronounce their names. Was it Tomas or Sortansky or something like that? And
Saturansky, man, Saturansky.
I don't know.
I live in Jersey. It would be remiss if I did not get that last name right.
But yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to figure out, some of the moves they made. I just saw transaction after transaction in the summer as they missed out on some of their free agent guys, and it felt like the front office was maybe reaching and just trying to do some roster fillers. Nicholson is a guy who obviously just left the team we just talked about in Orlando, and in minutes was able to produce here and there, but I just don't know where he fits, on this roster as well too. So I guess, my final question for you when it comes to the Washington Wizards is really, is this a team that, do you see them making a move potentially and, it blowing up, kind of imploding on them during the regular season where they're like, you know what, Scott Brooks, yeah, you come here and we want you to do well, but we need to get some of these guys out of here. Do you see something like that happening for this team?
It's tough because I don't even know what that move would be. That's the problem with Washington. They don't really have a ton of roster flexibility. You're not trading John Wall. So you're not going into full rebuild mode if John Wall is your starting point guard and he's your franchise. Is he still young enough to rebuild around? I don't know. I mean, I love John Wall, and I think he alone, his greatness alone, could carry the Wizards to 500 and maybe beyond. But the rest of the roster, man, if you remove John Wall or Brad Beal from that roster, this is a lottery team in my mind.
Wow. Powerful impact. Boom from the cannon. My man DJ Foster with us here from Fox Sports as we talk Southeast preview, just talking about the Washington Wizards. The team finished 41-41 last season, 22-19 at home, 19-22 on the road. Were successful in their own division, 10-6, but a team clearly struggling to defend. They averaged 104 points per game, but also yielded around 104 points per game. So something has got to give. Clearly, they have to be a team that needs to stay healthy. Hopefully, their bench will improve as the season moves forward. But clearly, a wild card team, much to the chagrin of myself and amongst my contemporaries with me here. Let's go ahead and move forward and talk about the team that finished third best in the division, and that would be the Charlotte Hornets. And really a surprise season for the Charlotte Hornets. I think all things considered, with the depth of the competition, and really with the litany of injuries that Steve Clifford had to endure, this was a basketball team that finished 48-34, and impressive. The type of team that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, but we saw the emergence of Kemba Walker. He is now a complete beast and legitimate, like top 8. We can safely say now, point guard in the NBA. And so now when you look at what this team has endured in this offseason, they lost granddaddy old Al Jefferson, but they still got a few old pieces on there. And then they added Marco Bellinelli to the mix. Seems like this team is replaced, and Roy Hibbert as well, too. So it seems like they've added some nice supplemental parts. Is this enough, though, DJ, for them to either maintain what they did with 48 wins, or could it give them 1 or 2 additional wins in this division and really a team that could be legitimized as a threat somewhere in the conversations of making to the playoffs?
I have big concerns in Charlotte, and I don't want to be negative Nancy 2 times in a row here.
Unfortunately, that's how the teams were set up, man. So,
that's the way it's
You're
going.
You're such a pessimist so far. That's just hurting me.
Like, of course the Clippers writer is going to come in and just be so negative about everything. He hasn't ever had a championship to watch. Listen, I think they have a lot of guys who are coming off career years, which always scares me. I think there's some regression, especially for a guy like Marvin Williams, who just all of a sudden became this great three-point shooter kind of out of nowhere. I think he may decline a little bit. Nicholas Batum is always someone who has kind of battled effort issues and consistency. He's making $20.8 million now this year. A lot of times once guys get paid, it's a little tougher to get them to play hard every single night. I love Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. He's a great defender. I hope he can stay healthy. I think they're going to feel the loss of Jeremy Lin a little bit more than people think in that second unit. They just have a lot of guys, to me, that could be on the decline this year. If they had any coach other than Steve Clifford, basically, a few other guys you can sprinkle in there. Any coach other than Steve Clifford, I'd be very much so down on their prospects for this season. I think Steve Clifford is a good enough coach, and this defense will still be strong enough to keep them afloat. But offensively, I see some issues coming.
Yeah, I have to agree with you 100%. This team, to me, really did overachieve. It's not very often where a roster is able to really address some of their concerns. Like the Hornets have been a team that very, very poor in pace and weren't able to score. They finished 17th in pace, but were actually 9th in offensive rating. Defense has always been a Clifford calling card. And you're right. Now that same roster isn't exactly back intact, and I've been 100% agree with you with Jeremy Lin. As much as people like to make fun of him, they're going to miss that guy tremendously. And what I want to ask you now, though, from an offensive standpoint in that second unit, Kaminsky didn't play a whole lot last year, and then they tried to throw him out there, give him some plus minutes in the playoffs. Do you see him taking a huge leap in his second year playing for the Charlotte Hornets?
No. I think he caps out as a 15 to 20 minute rotation guy in the future.
So we're saying Frank. We're not saying Frank the Tank. We're saying Frank Tanks. That's what we're saying. I mean, that's what it feels like you're saying. I listen. I really thought that they were really high on Kaminsky as a role player, and really has an opportunity. I even feel like maybe to some level and degree that he might even replace Cody Zeller. I know you. I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to cut your point off, DJ, but I'm just saying, like, I've been waiting for Cody Zeller to step up, man. And then I feel like he's just kind of like dangling the carrot so we can get a revival of Roy Hibbert's, as the big man down there in Charlotte, or maybe even Frank the Tank.
Yeah, anytime you need to interrupt with an old school reference, please do so. That's 100% acceptable. The thing with Kaminsky to me is he can't move. I think he's going to have problems creating his own shot. He's not the scorer anymore in the NBA that we saw in college. He's not a guy who's going to post up and get buckets anymore. Defensively, there are issues. I mean, he got outplayed by Spencer Hawes last year. Like, legitimately, Spencer Hawes was a better option on the floor for Charlotte most nights than Frank Kaminsky was. So I don't have big hopes for him. And Kemba Walker, while we're talking about it, I know everyone loves Kemba Walker. He had a great season last year. He's really kind of emerged as this awesome go-to scorer, but buyer beware. He shot 37% from the three-point line last year, a career high. The year before that, 30.4, 30% three-point shooter. Everything screams regression about this team. I can't stress that enough. Everyone's stats, everyone's contract situation just screams regression. So I'm thinking Charlotte takes a step back.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. And look, it's not that I don't disagree with you. I just feel like there are probably more question marks about this team in this division more than anything else. It's hard for me, though, I feel like every single one of these teams can essentially take a step back, but then we weren't talking about too many teams that are essentially taking giant steps forward either. So,
right.
So who does take a step forward? Like everyone keeps talking about Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and I'm like, I'm still waiting. I like the name. You can do a lot with MKG. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a whole lot of rap artists that I can rename them and they can give them MKG and they can sound a whole lot tougher than what their name really represents. But Kidd-Gilchrist, this guy can't stay healthy, and I've yet to see where he makes the kind of impact that he's made when everyone was talking about him out of the University of Kentucky. I don't know where it didn't translate for him, but what is it going to take for Kidd-Gilchrist to really legitimize the overall effect that he's supposed to have on a basketball team like this Charlotte Hornets?
Yeah, it just has to stay healthy. I really like MKG. I think he's a great defender, one of the best wing defenders in basketball in my mind when he's healthy. He can cover about 4 different positions realistically. There's a lot that he can provide. He just has to stay healthy. And now with the NBA going the way that it is, with teams wanting 5 shooters out there and 5 playmakers preferably, he needs to show that he can at least do one or the other. Have a passable jumper or make plays for people. And that's not exactly something we've seen from him in the past.
Got a quick one before we move on from the Hornets here. Regarding Clifford and his ability to really coach guys up defensively. Is this a year when, and I say this with a grain of salt, so forgive the question, but can we see Hibbert bounce back in any way, shape, or form, to even a partial his Indiana days?
I just think Hibbert he's gone the way of the dinosaur. These guys, these slow, big guys who just take up space, it's really hard for them to have a positive impact. I think he can certainly be better than he was on the Lakers last year. The Lakers, their perimeter defense just bled, and he was just trying to cover it up all game long when he actually played. Charlotte will be much better on the defense perimeter. They'll actually funnel the correct drivers to him. His life will be much easier than it was for the Lakers, but I think the version of Roy Hibbert that everyone has in their head of this big-time, shot blocker that was challenging LeBron at the rim with verticality, I think those days are gone.
The Charlotte Hornets finishing the season again 48-34, 30-11 at home, 18-23 on the road. They finished 8-8 in the division. More impressive, though, is the competition that they brought to the Eastern Conference, a 33-19 record in the conference, 103 points per game scored, 100 allowed, a 2.7 differential. So clearly this is a team, it can go either way. But our man DJ Foster, he believes that this team may take a step back, may fall back into a small level of regression. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 2016-17 preview of the Southeast Division with our special guest, DJ Foster, writer for Fox Sports, host of Locked On Clippers podcast, available Monday through Friday. Be sure to check them out on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. As we move along to the second best team in the Southeast Division, I'm having grandeur of the San Antonio Spurs for a moment there, but in the Southeast Division, the Atlanta Hawks, they finished second with a 48-34 record. I mean, yes, we're going to be a little repetitive on how these three teams have bottomed out here, but really impressive at home. Clearly a magnificent job from Coach Budenholzer. One of the big moves, they moved Jeff Teague along, and now this is the era of Derek Schroeder. I always keep saying Schroeder, but Schroeder sounds so maniacal, right? So, and then the big signing is Dwight Howard, which, talk about taming the shrewd. I mean, he's going to have his hands full keeping that guy happy. But when you look at this basketball team, falls short of nothing. Budenholzer has already been able to turn water into wine plenty of times already. This team still finds itself as being one of the top teams in the Southeastern Conference. Do you kind of feel that same kind of sentiment, DJ?
I do. I think they're a team that's easy to write off, and maybe I'm just stealing the Spurs narrative, but it feels like a lot of people are writing off Atlanta because they lost Al Horford. I don't see it happening. They play with a system, a style of basketball that, it'll have to change a little bit with Dwight Howard in for Al Horford, but I think they're going to be still pretty dynamic offensively. I'm expecting big things from Schroeder now that the job is fully his. He's not battling with Jeff Teague for minutes anymore. He's a little bit more mature. I think he's a great playmaker, an underrated scorer. I'm liking Atlanta this year, probably more than most people, I'd imagine.
No, I mean, I'm right there with you. And, we talk about Schroeder. Like, I went on a limb in our last show, in our award show, and say, he has a real opportunity potentially to be, a most improved player candidate. His per 36 minute average out to almost 20 a game and 8 assists. And I just feel like, those numbers could, if those were to hold true, really could warrant some consideration. But a guy, you mentioned a point a little bit earlier on regarding guys who get paid. Kent Bazemore got his money. He got paid. How do you think he's going to react now, and how impactful will he be now that he's been, he's a paid man, as we like to say in the business?
I think the nice thing about Bazemore is that he's a great defender and a high-energy defender, and I think that will remain. He hasn't had issues. It's never been a matter of whether Bazemore's playing hard enough, like there has been with Batum in the past, going back to that. So I think Bazemore will be just fine on his new contract. I do think he'll need to become sort of a bigger factor in the offense, especially since they'll rely more on his shooting, since they don't have Horford as kind of that safety valve anymore. But I like him. I really like their young wings, too. Taurean Prince and DeAndre Bembry. I was watching a little bit of preseason action with them. Those guys can play, man. Bembry has a nice all-around game. Prince looks like an athletic slasher at the wing. I think Budenholzer is going to do some special things with these young wings.
It's interesting because I often say that when someone leaves, it's always the guys that we don't talk about that seem to be affected more so than the player and how he affects the team. So when I think about a guy like Al Horford leaving, I think about how much of an effect that this has on a guy like Kyle Korver. And Kyle Korver is someone where I think he just found his place playing for the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, where he was a journeyman shooter, and it's very quickly can shooters just find themselves, getting partial minutes on the bench. He gets, 28, 30 plus minutes, for Budenholzer. But the one thing that I have seen is that he doesn't seem to get his shot off the way he did anymore. And I'm just wondering now with the restructuring of this team, can he find his way? I think that having Al Horford as that safety valve to help open up the lanes for him to shoot, to give him the ability to separate and score. I just don't know whether or not I can see that with the same confidence as Dwight Howard and whether you're flipping Millsap and Muscala or Mike Scott and those guys. I mean, and to me, this team is going to have to shoot the basketball more, even if they have paid off Kent Bazemore a ton of money. Where do you see Kyle Korver fitting in the mix of this?
Yeah, that is an excellent point, and you can kind of start to see the decline with Corver, especially in last year's postseason, right? Start to see he's struggling to get his own shot off, like you said, not getting open with the regularity that he once did. I think theoretically, having Howard down on the block could help him if teams decide to double Dwight Howard. I don't know if that's necessarily a thing anymore. So I'm not really excited about Corver's bounce back potential this season, but I think the young wings have enough juice where they can replace some of those 5 to 6 minutes that Corver used to play, and maybe now he's a little fresher, and maybe that'll help his shot in ways he can spend more energy offensively instead of trying to have to save himself for 32, 34, 36 minutes a night.
So DJ, before we move on from the Atlanta Hawks, I wanted to ask you about two guys. One will be a starter, obviously, and one will be coming off the bench and will be starting on the shelf with an injury. Jarrett Jack and Dwight Howard. What can you expect from those two guys as leaders? Not necessarily, from a statistical standpoint, but can those guys really kind of help lead the Atlanta Hawks in the locker room?
Yeah, coming back home is a lot of times a good thing for players. I think Dwight Howard is going to kind of be re-energized by it. I think he'll be happy to get out of Houston. He's not dealing with James Harden anymore. He's not dealing with these championship expectations, I guess, as much in Atlanta. You can the nice thing about playing for Atlanta is you're not in the spotlight anymore. As bad as it can be, especially for home playoff games, the Hawks are not the focus, right? So you can kind of slip into obscurity, just put the work in, do your thing. Jarrett Jack behind Schroeder, I really like a lot. Jack basically is regarded as one of the best teammates in the NBA. I've heard it from multiple guys. Everyone seems to love him. So having that kind of veteran mentor behind Schroeder, who talented but can get a little crazy with the basketball, I think it's going to help him a lot. And Jack has this habit of just kind of popping up and making clutch shots that he really shouldn't make. So I liked both of those additions.
Atlanta Hawks, again, 48-34 in the season, 27-14 at home, 21-20 on the road, 8-8 in their own division. Had a little tougher time trying to maintain or stay afloat with a 29-23 record in the Eastern Conference. 102 points per game, but defensively one of the better teams in the NBA with roughly around 99. So this is a team clearly under Budenholzer with expectations to replicate what they did last season and certainly be in the mix as one of the Eastern Conference playoff teams and possibly a team that can recapture what they did a couple of seasons ago, being the top dog in the Southeast Division. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw with our special guest, DJ Foster, our 2016-17 preview of the Southeast Division. DJ Foster is a writer for Fox Sports. Be sure to check out the podcast, Locked on Clippers podcast, available on Stitcher Radio and iTunes Monday through Friday. And the final team for us to discuss, I don't know if it's a level of overachievement. I don't know if it's the Pat Riley scowl and the Eric Spoelstra hairdo, but the Miami Heat find themselves being the top team last year. Maybe it's because they had one of the great two guards in the game in Dwayne Wade. It certainly would help their cause. A team that really pushed the Southeast Division to the gamut and certainly was one of the more competitive teams in the Eastern Conference. 48-34, but man, this team has suffered so much in this offseason, more so reputation than and that I think may impact this team, as well as the personnel loss, Dwayne Wade leaving Miami, clearly the whole situation regarding Chris Bosh. And look, we've seen adversity impact a franchise, impact organizations. It's interesting to me, DJ, because no one ever really likes the Miami Heat, and it's tough because no one would ask for the kind of things that have happened to this basketball team. But sometimes you have to wonder, do they bring this upon themselves? And when you look at what's happened to this team, DJ, how big of a blow is this for a team that's been so successful the last 7 years?
I think it really hurts their chances going forward of getting the big time free agents again. Just the way they handled the whole Dwayne Wade situation, and Pat Riley coming out and saying, like, I wish I would have done more and I could have done all these things. Well, that's your job. Like, don't come back and say afterwards, like, we should have done more. That Dwayne Wade is the franchise. He's everything to the people of Miami.
He's Miami. Yeah, he's Miami.
He's Miami. and you couldn't find a way to keep him there? You're really going to haggle over a couple $1 million or whatever it was? I mean, pay him whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to keep him there. He's everything to Miami. Now the Heat face a situation where they have to completely learn basketball again, basically. No Wade, no Bosh. Any stylistic hope of having the same way that they played last year, it's gone. So they have to totally restart from scratch, essentially. And you're doing it with a point guard in Goran Dragic, who probably has no interest in being on a rebuilding team. We saw kind of what happened when he was in Phoenix and the Suns started to tank a little bit. Dragic was a big reason why they tanked. He's moody to me. He's a guy, if he's not playing for a winning basketball team, he'll just kind of sulk and cause some issues maybe in the locker room. With Miami, I just think, man, I have a hard time seeing how this is a playoff team, and I could see it turning really south really quickly.
Yeah, I've been going to their media days, since for a little while, and just to see the decline after LeBron left, and now Wade and the Bosh after all that, and that mood this year in media day was somber. It was absolutely horrendous, and I guess maybe even more poignantly so because Riley dropped the Bosh bomb that day, minutes before media day opened up. So it was just a really, really somber mood, and you're trying to get that excitement, and it's hard for me to kind of see where it is. But they did bring in a guy like Dion Waiters, maybe thought he was going to get a bigger payday, and OKC kind of ended up letting him go. Do you see him now really being able to be the player that he thinks he can be? Yeah, because I know Waiters is a very confident guy, but you see him kind of actually now finally fulfilling that role and being a guy who can score 17, 18 points a game and being a leader on a roster?
I think fantasy basketball players should be interested in like the soulless edition of 17 to 18 points a game, like you said. But from like a basketball standpoint, from like real life basketball, Dion Waiters is not a fun player to play with. Defensively, offensively. In fact, he's one of the last players I would want to play basketball with. To me, it just looks like a classic player who's a name, who could still be viewed as having potential, but he's going to be a big stat guy on a bad team. That's just, when I look at Waiters, that's all I can think about right now.
So in layman's terms, what we're saying is that this ain't no Deion Sanders like love fest for Dion Waiters. Then is what we're saying.
No, a much lesser Dion.
Much less than Dion. Okay, so, but I mean, all jokes aside, though, seriously, is it really going to be that bad, DJ? No, tell me how you really feel about it. I completely agree with you. I just feel like, and I had a hard time with this because I really felt like this route actually could be a good thing for Goran Dragic because he's going to have a big in Hassan Whiteside where he has those moments, he could just give the ball to Hassan and Hassan can just, do what Hassan does. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know if that's going to translate to maintaining the level of competitiveness that it's going to take for them to win, not just this division, but even to stay within striking distance to make the playoffs. So when I think about guys like Tyler Johnson and guys like Justice Winslow, do they get hampered by all of this, attitude, dynamic, personality clash, and with everything? I mean, these are guys that when they came onto this team, we thought that they could really be lightning rods. But now they could, kind of like be rolling thunder. and I would hate to see that because these are two talented individuals that I think, if given an opportunity, can really have an impact, which could really be a bad team, a team with a bad attitude that could affect how these guys move forward.
I really like Winslow, and I love that right away as a rookie, he stepped into a big role and kind of accepted that he was a role player, that he was there for defense first. I think he's a guy who gets it. He's a really smart basketball player. I like Tyler Johnson a lot too. I just don't think that at this stage in their careers, you can look at those guys to put a team on their back and lead them to the playoffs. And I really think that might be necessary. I don't trust Dragic at all, and I don't want to keep harping on that. But Whiteside, look, I know he was great. He earned his contract. He was a monster last year. Do we really trust him on a long-term big deal now in the first year of his contract, to give that same level of effort and production on what very likely could be a losing team in the first 15 to 20 games of the season?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and I'd throw it back at you in terms of saying, do you see him being as, I don't want to say toxic, but maybe that is the best word, as again just a guy trying to out there get his numbers like Waiter? So will Whiteside and Waiter just be out there kind of taking turns, if you will, trying to get it done and so he can put up the best stats on a bad team? Is that how you see things?
I think what Shaw's trying to ask is, do you see Hassan being Odell-ish? That's what he wants to know. Can all these numbers really just translate to a me type basketball player, and not a we type, change the face and the franchise, in the culture of winning under the Miami Heat?
Right. He would not be my first pick to change the culture of a team, to step into a leadership role that was so clearly vacated by both Wade and Bosch. To put it lightly, he would not be my first choice, and neither would Dragic. And I think that's what it boils down to on this team. That there's some talent, there's some good young players. Eric Spoelstra is a really good coach, but I just think this is going to be kind of a selfish basketball team, like you mentioned, and one that if any hint of the wheels falling off early in the season, I think just that negative momentum is just going to carry them down into the lottery. And I think once that begins to happen, Pat Riley may pull the plug on some of these vets and realize, okay, it's time now to really fully rebuild with Dwayne Wade gone.
I mean, just a quick follow-up, regarding that, because, again, being at Media Day, Spoelstra kept saying, this is going to be my toughest job yet. I look forward to the challenge, et cetera, et cetera. And much to as the same case it was in Charlotte with Clifford, Spoelstra is, again, probably an underrated coach, a very good coach. You don't think that his coaching acumen and having been through the war and been through the battles and all those things, he can reach these guys for them to not go into that trap of playing, selfish basketball and really try to buy into a team concept, especially with so many similarly talented guys on the roster? You don't think he'd be able to do that for this team?
I like Eric Spoelstra a lot. I think it's asking way too much of a coach to take this roster and have them be both, effective offensively and defensively. There's talent there. To me, there's just not enough, though, to justify thinking that they're a playoff team.
Well, the Miami Heat were the top team in the division last year, third seed in the Eastern Conference, 28-13 at home, 20-21 on the road. 10-6 in their division, 31-21 in the Eastern Conference. One of the better teams defensively, again, only allowing around 98 points per game. And it's hard to imagine, man, that in a year or two, Pat Riley is talking about giving the keys to Udonis Haslem as the last remaining member of the Miami Heat, the true Miami Heat, and not be Dwayne Wade. So I completely can agree with you there. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA with our special guest, DJ Foster from Fox Sports. Be sure to check out the podcast, Locked On Clippers podcast, available Monday through Friday on Stitcher, iTunes. So now it's that time, DJ, where we give our predictions top to bottom, or bottom to top, for that matter. From your perspective, how do you see the Southeast Division playing out for this upcoming season?
All right. Should I just rank them top to bottom?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's do this. So finishing first in the Southeast Division, in my mind, will be the Atlanta Hawks. I don't think they take as big of a step back as some people do, switching out Horford for Howard. Second team, this is probably going to come as a fairly big surprise to a lot of people. I have Orlando finishing second in the division. I really like them
not that your analysis earlier in the show was giving some subtle hints to this. I thought you were taking a leap of faith and putting them number one. But so
I'm not that crazy yet.
Okay,
but I do think Orlando's a playoff team.
The Heat hasn't affected you in the West Coast as easily as it would affect mine. All right, okay.
It's true. So okay. That's how I have the top two. I have Atlanta and Orlando, both making the playoffs. I have the other three teams missing the playoffs. I have it ranked Hornets, Wizards, and then the Heat bringing it up the rear. I have all three of those teams missing the playoffs.
And that all makes sense to me. I think I'm gonna, jump in here now and give mine as well too. I do think the Atlanta Hawks are extremely well coached, and they're being written off a little bit. I'm a believer, maybe foolishly so, in Howard being able to have a bounce back year to some degree, especially with expectations not being as high as you even alluded to a little bit, DJ. I think the Hawks finished first. That second team, I've really been flopping. I hate this division. I hate this. It's the reason why it's the last division that
first you hated the Heat. Now you just hate the division. All right,
because it's impossible to figure it out. I think all these teams, as we've been alluded to, it's been doom and gloom, and it's really been it's a crapshoot for me. And honestly, I have the Hawks being the only team that make the playoffs out of this division. So for the sake of being quicker, I'm going to go ahead and throw the Orlando Magic. I'm going to go ahead with DJ. He's convinced me on my own show to put them to.
See, DJ, that's all it took. You're good. Listen, you're already hosting Locked On Clippers. You might be hosting the Baseline NBA podcast before this is over with.
Or at least Locked On Magic.
Yeah, we are definitely making a little bid for that too. So yeah, I'm gonna ride with DJ there. I'm gonna say let's go with the Wizards third. I mean,
you're just tossing it in there.
It's a crapshoot, man. The Wizards third. I'm going to go with the Heat 4, and I'm going to go with Charlotte coming in last place. And again, but by that, one of the main mantras of all the division previews that we've been doing is that I think even still, though, that 2 through 5 situation, that might be a matter of 1 or 2 games. It's not like, okay, one's going to be 5 games or 10 games ahead of the other, whatever the case may be. I think all those are going to be really close, but I still think Atlanta's the class of the division overall.
All right, well, listen, let me kind of break down my little quagmire, but I will be very brief about this. So I'm not saying that the Washington Wizards are going to be the best team in this division, but the one thing that I will say holistically with this division, that every one of these teams are going to be taking a step back, and 48 wins is not going to win this division, which is why I probably have the Washington Wizards as a sleeper team. Now, I agree with you, DJ. I think the Hawks are the best built team to win this division, and they'll probably be a little bit closer to that 48 mark than the rest of these other teams. I think maybe 45 or 46 might even win this division. So the Hawks I have is first. I have the Washington Wizards second. I just have this feeling that Beal is going to stay healthy, and when you have a point guard combination of Wall and Beal against the rest of this division specifically, I just think that this Wizards team just has enough in the tank that they can at least get you 42, 43 wins and maybe be a 7-8 seed in the playoffs. I don't think 3 make it out of this division, but I certainly can see them and maybe like the Charlotte Hornets and maybe even the Orlando Magic battling it out to grab one of those lower seeds. But I have the Wizards coming in at second. I have the Charlotte Hornets coming in at third. And then I have the Orlando Magic fourth and the Miami Heat coming in at dead last. As much as I want to believe that the Orlando Magic is a team that will be vastly improved, it's hard for me to see that they are 10 wins better. Given what they've had to do, and even having Frank Vogel in as their head coach, I still think that there's going to be some growing pains with this basketball team. And I'm just going to rely more on a team that's had most of their core members a part of this team a year ago to be able to win games that they really should be winning if they just execute better and just have a better idea of how this division plays. So that's how I have the Southeast division panning out. Feel free to rip me right now.
No, I mean you're fine with that. Again, like I said, this division sucks. It's hard to predict what's really going to happen here. And I mean, we're all relatively educated basketball minds and follow the game very closely. And it really wasn't until as much as prepared for this show as I was, but really going through it now and even kind of talking out with you guys, it's like, this is terrible. There's nothing to really like, especially
if there's one division that like I said, like top to bottom can take a severe step back, it would really be like we've talked about every single division. And I think collectively, we can see where teams make that leap and push maybe even the top teams, to play a little bit more, play a little bit competitively, and maybe even that gap, shortens for a few teams, maybe 2-3 games, but it's still, which is the better teams. Like every single one of these teams. I mean, we could be completely in reverse. The Magic could be the best team in the Southeast Division for all we know. I mean, they can anyone, and I said this in one of my previews for the Washington Wizards, this is a team that can overachieve in a division where underachieving is a compliment. So
agree. Are you guys football fans at all?
Oh yeah, well, under the Lolo, I'm a Bears fan. I guess now everybody knows that. See, the shame of it all.
This is like the NFC South of basketball. Like anyone can win the division. Who knows? Good luck trying to predict it. They'll all finish within a few games of each other. Someone new wins the division everywhere. I mean, it's really, you guys are dead on. I know you've done all the other divisions, so you know this is the most unpredictable division in basketball.
And that's why it makes it, more fun. The haphazard. We have a guy out from the West Coast who covers the Clippers to kind of help us preview the Southeast. So why not keep up with the
these guys, listen, these teams can only be so lucky, because I don't know how much. I mean, seriously, we're all over the place, right? And we're focusing on the Southeast. I can only imagine what all of these teams' internal media outlets must be thinking about in breaking down their own team. Like, they're putting like mad question marks on like absolutely everything, every position, any X factors, whatever the case may be, right?
It's tough out here, man. So DJ, thank you so much, man. I mean, an amazing show. Thank you for joining us, and you're a friend of the family now, and we hope they can bring you back on at some point again too, and definitely throughout the season. And we'll even get you talking about Little Clippers basketball next time we have you on.
Awesome. I'd love to come on anytime, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Man, oh man. Talk about ending it on the good foot. And I mean, you can't ask for a better guest than our man DJ Foster Shaw. Not only bringing the noise, but bringing the insight as well. And just really a dynamic discussion that we had with regards to a division that, I mean, clearly had you frustrated. I mean, I thought we were going to have to come down and have to, resuscitate you.
Well, I mean, it's funny because, again, it was such a great show. It was so energetic, but there was so much doom and gloom, for a division that really is,
struggling so hard to find some positivity in this whole thing.
They're like, so many teams have regressed within this division. So, but I mean, thanks to DJ for coming on. It's a great guy who's definitely doing his thing out there with Fox Sports and on the Locked On Network. And, the Locked On Network is becoming fans of the show as well, too. We had Josh Lloyd from the Locked On Fantasy Network as well, too. So thanks to those guys. Thanks to everybody who helped us with the division previews. This was the last one, but it's definitely a doozy as we close out the Southeast Division.
Yeah, and I got to say, this has been one of our more impressive runs doing the previews. I know sometimes it's been a struggle, but we love to make sure that we keep our listeners well equipped and well informed about not just their favorite teams, but all of the teams throughout the NBA and the impacts that they're going to have, not just in the conference, but also within their own division. Clearly, we still have our conversations upcoming, Shaw, with the who's going to be in the conference finals and ultimately playing in the NBA finals. But I think one thing can't be remiss is that this season, straight up and down, is really going to be a competitive season. I know people are going to be downtrodden because they think that this is just going to be dominated by the Warriors and the Cavaliers. But again, we keep talking about what this also means for the rest of the teams that are out there, that I think that because of what's happened in this offseason, that it's actually brought a call to arms that these teams need to step their game up. And I really think that there are going to be some great games being played. And I would be remiss if not saying that despite the doom and gloom, there's going to be a lot of competitive basketball to be played in the Southeast Division. Because again, we just don't know with all certainty who is deserving and who is outright should be the winner of this division.
Nonetheless, I mean, doom and gloom be damned. It's still drama, and that's still exciting, and that's still intriguing. So, and nothing else, you can get your popcorn ready to kind of watch how some of these teams matriculate throughout the entire NBA season. And doom and gloom also breeds change, where general managers and coaches, sometimes those guys get fired, or sometimes those guys decide they need to shake up the roster and they decide to make moves and put people on other teams. So either way, there's going to be something to watch, and I think that's what makes the NBA so great. It's a product that continues to deliver no matter how bad or how good it even is, depending on the division.
Definitely, man. So once again, we would like to thank our man DJ Foster. Once again, be sure to check him out on Twitter at Fox Sports Foster. His show, Locked On Clippers podcast, Monday through Friday, Stitcher Radio, iTunes. Be sure to check it out. Great show. And what more can we say, man? We are looking forward to this upcoming NBA season. We thank you and yours. Be sure to check out the Shaw Sports, www.shawsports.net, to check out all of the previews that we've done for this upcoming season, and keep us locked in, man. So for the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do, and we'll catch up with you next time.